Welcome to Gray Eminence Media. Let's get into it.
Well, if you do not want to listen, if you do not, I've never asked. You have been fighting deportation. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. You do not. You don't know what you're talking about. You are a liar. You are very important people. And please direct your daughter.
The entitlement of these people chanting, it's really ridiculous. Okay. Now, of course, more than likely the youth didn't come over to the country illegally on their own. Most likely their family smuggled them in here, or they were unaccompanied and they were smuggled into the U.S. By themselves. But let's continue listening. And shout out to Grassroots Army, by the way. Oh, they demand. They demand. Okay. What kind of immigrant youth? Well, listen. Without hurting your families, okay. This is a little tricky subject, a little touchy. But if your families broke the law and entered the U.S. Illegally, they are subject to deportation, and that's not the fault of the taxpayer. It's not the fault of Americans. It's not any of our faults. It's the faults of the families that decided to break the law and enter the country illegally, knowing that in the future they may face deportation. It could be 20 years into their life in the US. It could be 5 years. It could be 30 years after the fact. Okay. Um, they know this going into their journey into the US. So I'm sorry, I can't support them on that. If their family members ended up breaking the law, they do need to be deported, and then the child can figure out, of course, if they're 18 or up. Of course, they can decide if they would want to go back with their family or if they want to stay in the U.S. So it is what it is. It's called personal responsibility. And as you know, right now in New York City, the amount of illegal aliens has definitely put a lot of stress on the city. We know in El Paso, Texas, specifically, but all across the southern border states, but specifically in El Paso, they are actually past capacity in terms of handling the illegal aliens. At the moment, they have been straining the city's resources, and so they're in a very difficult situation right now. And of course, we know that the border currently is a complete mess, and it's at record highs in terms of illegal crossings. Border security. Well, what kind of border security? Because yes, I agree we need that, but I feel like they're talking about a different kind of border security, which God knows what their version of that is. In struggle. Listen, if you came into the country illegally, you chose that struggle and you decided to create a legal trail behind you. It ain't nobody's fault.
Okay, you've asked some. You've
Oh,
asked
she
some
mad. She
questions.
mad.
You've asked some questions. You've asked some questions. You've asked some questions. Thank you. Thank you for this. No, I want to. No, you've asked.
Sick. Sick. I mean, the entitlement is insane. Imagine a group of people bragging about how they're undocumented or how they're illegally in the country, and they did something like this in Japan or China. Um, eh, this is beyond mind blowing. So, this is what's going on, and I don't think Nancy Pelosi was panicking. I think she was raging a little bit. So I think that was just an important clip to share. This happened to Nancy Pelosi a few days ago, and it kind of shows the level of entitlement that a lot of these undocumented individuals have. Okay. Now let's go here to our next story. So now we're going to Canada. I'm sure all of you heard about what happened when the parliament gave a standing ovation to a Nazi. So let's get into it.
A Canadian parliamentarian is apologizing after a standing ovation was given to a 98-year-old veteran allegedly belonging to a Nazi division in World War II. The blunder took place during Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to the country and address to Canada's House of Commons. Veteran Yaroslav Hunka, quote, stood and appeared to salute when he was recognized by House Speaker Anthony Rota.
By the way, before you invite a veteran, right, you would think that these government officials would do their due diligence, do the research, do the background checks before they invite this person over. At our regular jobs that we apply for, we got to go through all kinds of checks. So I don't see why at the highest level of government, in terms of inviting guests, that they're not doing their due diligence. It's kind of weird.
Who introduced Hunka as a Canadian-Ukrainian war hero.
We have here in the chamber today Ukrainian-Canadian world veteran from the Second World War who fought the Ukrainian independence against the Russians and continues to support the troops today, even at his age of 98.
Okay. So before we continue, let's go ahead and dive into this person, right? His name is Yaroslav Hunka. Okay. So let's quickly go to his profile here. Just make sure that we're doing our own due diligence and actually verifying what the media is saying. So here he is. Just like the speaker said, he is a Ukrainian World War II veteran. Um, However, he was in a specific SS division, a Nazi Germany military formation. So he definitely has Nazi ties right here. He's part of the Waffen SS. And then, of course, the scandal was updated and integrated into his profile. So this is just to get a sense of who he is. Okay, now let's head back to what happened in Parliament.
His name is Yaroslav Hunka. He's a Ukrainian hero, a Canadian hero, and we thank him for all his service. Thank you.
As you can see in the clip, Rota's words received a lengthy applause and lots of waving from the floor, including from Zelensky and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
Yesterday, Jewish groups condemned the honoring of Hunka, saying he had been a member of the Waffen SS unit, which was comprised of Ukrainians, according to the Washington Post. Heinrich Himmler, who was a leading member of the Nazi Party in Germany, formed the Waffen SS. The group was involved with mass shootings, anti-partisan warfare, and supplying guards for Nazi concentration camps. Rhoda apologized yesterday for what occurred on Friday, writing in a statement, quote, "I recognize an individual in the gallery I have subsequently become aware of more information which causes me to regret my decision to do so. I particularly want to extend my deepest apologies to the Jewish community in Canada and around the world. I accept full responsibility for my actions." The Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center for Holocaust Studies said in a statement, "The fact that a veteran who served in a Nazi military unit was invited to and given a standing ovation in Parliament is shocking. Shocking, to say the least, Bree. I couldn't believe that. Almost a minute, it seemed like, of applause."
Yeah, if this were, I think, an isolated event, I think that it wouldn't cause as much of a viral impact the way it did over the weekend on Twitter, at least. But it does.
And remember this: Putin always talked about how there were Nazi elements in the Ukrainian government, and that was part of the reason why he deployed this special operation. Now, I think the most important part of that piece is how he said that there are Nazi elements in the Ukrainian government. So, why don't we go ahead and actually verify some of these things? Okay, so we're gonna actually go ahead and look at the Azov Brigade. Okay, so this brigade is a formation of the National Guard of Ukraine, formerly based in Mariupol, okay, in the coastal region of the Sea of Azov. All right. Now, the unit has drawn controversy over its early and allegedly continuing association with far right groups and neo Nazi ideology. All right, you can even look at the symbol, kind of reminds you reminds you of a certain symbol that you learned in history class. Its use of controversial symbols linked to Nazism and early allegations that members of the unit participated in human rights violations, blah, 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 blah. Right. So you can go and look into the history, some of the violence that they committed. Now, we're not talking about just your standard warfare. We're talking about atrocities, weaponizing rape as a tool of war. So all kinds of things. Here we go. Human rights violations, neo-Nazism. So this is just a fact. There are, I wouldn't even say Nazi elements. I'll say there are significant Nazi elements within the Ukrainian government. So take that for what you will. And I think it's important to note that even a news source like NBC has even admitted to this, right? Ukraine's Nazi problem is real, even if Putin's denazification claim isn't, right? So not acknowledging this threat means that little is being done to guard against it. Okay. So let's see exactly or what kind of a comment Putin said in regards to the Nazism. Okay. So that Russia will strive for the demilitarization and denazification of Ukraine. Putin's destructive actions, among them the devastation of Jewish communities, make clear that he's lying when he says his goal is to ensure anyone's welfare. I mean, yeah, it's a political leader doing what he thinks he's best for Russian interests. Okay, so these are all kind of hard facts that you really can't deny. And so it's really incredible that here we have a essentially a Nazi in the Canadian Parliament getting a standing ovation, which kind of just helps Putin with his claims a little bit more. So it's these are all facts. And finally, let's go ahead and look at the latest in terms of the forever war. All right. I think we all know what the forever war is. It's a conflict that's going on right now in Eastern Europe. But let's go ahead and check out what a former Marine has said in Redacted.
Over, or are we about to have a forever war in Ukraine? A new piece by journalist Seymour Hersh is out, revealing that the war is over, and Washington basically knows it. They're admitting it now to Seymour Hersh. Quoting his piece, he says, "The reality is that Vladimir Zelensky's battered army no longer has any chance of a victory." And he says those in Washington admit that the war is essentially over. And yet The Economist magazine out with a brand new full cover story called Time for a Rethink, basically calling for a forever war in Ukraine, a permanent war in Ukraine. Senator Josh Hall
helping Ukraine win a long war. Great propaganda, The Economist. Great propaganda. And that's really going to help the taxpayers. Let's just continue sending our money over there.
Admitted in a meeting with Zelensky this week that the Biden administration is basically asking for a forever war, a permanent stalemate.
How was the meeting with Zelensky, and did it change your mind at all?
Well, no. I mean, what the meeting revealed to me is that in the words of President Zelensky, the conflict is a total stalemate. That's what he said. Totally frozen, I believe, was what his words were, which is also what the administration told us yesterday. The administration told us yesterday they want to spend $100 billion more, our money, more over the next year in the hopes that it will remain a stalemate. Which leads me to ask, what is the goal here?
So in the hopes that it will continue to be a stalemate. So that's a great question from the senator. Why? Why is there an end goal for it to be a stalemate?
Why does the warmonger neocons, I mean, they seem to be pushing it in this direction. Let's bring in former UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter to analyze where we are in this war. Scott, good to see you. Welcome back to the show.
It's good to see you. Thank you very much for having me.
So are we about to be in a forever war? Is that the goal here for these neocons and Democrats? I mean, let's put them all together. I mean, all of these corrupt people, they're all in it together, wanting to funnel $100 billion more into this machine. Or are we done? Are we going to walk away from this and say, wow, that was a huge mistake. Let's move on.
Neither. I mean, let's just be dead straight up honest here. The Americans have no credibility. The Europeans have no credibility. The Ukrainians have no credibility. The only side that has credibility is Russia. Stop listening to anything. Look, I love Seymour Hersh. He's a close friend. We've been friends for 25 years. The source he's quoting, I can't say what I want to say about the source on your show because I would have to use some very foul language. I mean, everybody's jumping on him saying, the words, oh, it's over, the army's destroyed. But look how he prefaces it. Putin was an idiot to go in. Putin did. So what he's saying is the source doesn't know anything about Russia. The source is as ignorant about Russia and about what's going on today as anybody else, that this is political spin. It's not an intelligence source by somebody who knows what's going on. It's an assessment by somebody who is changing their position because they bought into the nonsense early on that Putin's a thug, he was an idiot to invade, etc. That means you don't understand anything about the special military operation. And if you think this is going to be a frozen conflict, understand this. In order to be frozen, both sides have to agree to freeze. You know who's not going to freeze? Russia. Russia is winning this war. Russia will win this war, and this war will be won on the battlefield by terms set by Russia. I didn't just make that up. Sergei Lavrov basically threw those words back in the face of the Europeans. Because you remember back when they were cocky, back when they said, oh, we've got this stuff, Zelensky's going to launch a counteroffensive, they were saying, no negotiations, no negotiations. We're going to win this on the battlefield. And now everybody's saying.
Yeah, and I think this is a really good point, right? When you think about Afghanistan and Iraq, or, just why don't we just narrow it down? The Taliban, right? The Taliban never gave up. They were fighting on principle. They were fighting on culture, blood, history, land, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's something that is so primal and almost spiritual in a way, right? So they kind of saw their conflict as a almost like spiritual warfare. Now, if the U.S. couldn't defeat the Taliban, right? What in the world do they think when they're going up against Russia, a country that fought against Nazi Germany, a country that lost millions of lives uh, against the Nazis? I mean, the Russians have been through a lot in their history. Does the U.S. does the U.S. and its allies honestly think that, oh, we can't defeat the Taliban, but we're going to defeat Russia? Come on, man, wake up.
Freeze it, have negotiations. The Russians are saying, no, no, we sort of agree with you last time. It's going to be one on the battlefield. And that's the way it's going to be. $100 billion more to freeze a conflict. Let's just make this clear. The conflict will not be frozen. That $100 billion, if it's expended, will be wasted because the Russians will chew through it like a.
And that's what it is. So Biden and the administration basically are trying to throw billions of dollars at this conflict so that it can, quote unquote, stay frozen, or at least hold Russia at bay. But just like the analyst said, right, Scott Ritter, the West has been throwing money at this conflict for a long time, trying to have a permanent freeze on it, and it just doesn't work. The Russians keep going, they keep attacking, and all this money that's being thrown at the war is not gonna freeze Russia into any kind of inaction.
Hot knife through butter, just like they chewed through the $113 billion we've already poured into Ukraine. Is this war over? I mean, it's over as if, like the Second World War was, the war on the Eastern Front was over after Battle of Kursk. Everybody knows who's going to win this war. There's no one out there who can say, oh, Ukraine can turn this around. What they want is a frozen war. Why? Well, look at Lindsey Graham. It's the best investment we ever made, he said. We're spending all this money, only 5% of a defense budget, and we're killing Russians without any American boots on the ground, without any American body bags coming home. That's the kind of stuff that should put you in the docket in a court of law, found you guilty of conspiracy for mass murder and genocide, and hung by the neck until dead.
Oh,
I mean, Lindsey Graham should be kicked out of the Senate, and anybody who thinks like him should be kicked out of Congress because it's just stupid. The Russians had every right to initiate this action. The United States, NATO doubled down on stupid. The initial stupid was expanding NATO up to the Russian border, knowing that it would trigger a Russian military response. Having triggered the military response, we then opted to continue the fight, even though the Russians were working to get a negotiated termination of this conflict. I just need to remind your audience, had Zelensky signed the peace agreement that the Russians had on the table that would have ended this conflict on 1 April 2022, Zaporizhia would be Ukrainian. Kherson would be Ukrainian. The Donbass would probably be going through an internationally monitored referendum right now to determine what its future would be. 400,000 Ukrainian men would be alive. 20 million Ukrainian civilians.
yeah, Zelensky got a little too cocky. He thought that all that Western support was gonna give him some flexibility to negotiate better terms. Nope, that ain't the case, buddy. That ain't the case. Well, hey guys, we will continue on that former Marines analysis in the next video. Have a good one.